Hello, you beautiful souls. Welcome to another week of Awaken and Align. Before I get into this episode, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. For all of you interested in getting a transit reading for 45 minutes, I am offering a special deal for a month, $99. And I'm doing this because the last time I offered this, I think back in the spring, a lot of you messaged me and said, thank you so much for offering it at this price point because, in this economy, how can somebody afford to spend over like $300 in a reading? And I totally understand that and I sympathize with that. And I offer this because astrology was one of the most life changing tools for me to understand myself, validate myself and my experiences, and also help me to understand the cycles and patterns that I was breaking away from and what my life lesson was at the time. And I want to always be able to offer something that is affordable to everybody. So I'm going away for most of September. So just make sure to book before I leave, which I think is in the middle of September. So this price will be available for 1 month only, just like last time. And it's $99 for 45 minutes. And yeah, I hope to meet some of you that I get to follow along on your journey and you all write to me. And I'm so grateful. I haven't done a solo episode in a really long time, mostly because I was going through my own little transformation phase. And it's funny because this episode is totally inspired by one of my longtime Reiki clients who I saw yesterday, last night. So you know who you are if you're listening to this. And I was sharing with her what I've been going through the last couple months, but also the last couple of years and even beyond that, and how this has all been a culmination of me really understanding who I am, owning it, and then talking about it and sharing it with other people with the sole intention to help others on their journey of discovering themselves. And she said, "You're such a light. You are always positive. You're so optimistic. And I would never have known that you would go through such dark times, that you would go through dark nights of the soul." And I wanted to remind her and also you listening out there that there can be no light without dark, that we are both. We have both within us, we have both without, and our experiences that are both chaotic, messy, heartbreaking, painful, grieving, mourning is just as important as the joyous, playful, pleasurable, fun, happy times. Both of them make us who we are. That is our agreement here on this earthly incarnation. And I don't know why it had to be that way, but it just is. So I just wanted to remind everybody that if you see me on social media, Instagram and TikTok, you are seeing like 20% of me. You are seeing a very curated, very intentional representation of my experience. So please don't compare your experience to mine. Honor where you are, honor your timing, and honor that it unfolds just as it should be. You're exactly where you're meant to be. You're exactly where you need to be. Every experience that you've gone through up until this point was necessary, was important. And I was also telling her that, there were 10 years where I was in a deep depression and couldn't seem to get myself together, quote unquote. I used alcohol to escape and numb. And I used to blame myself for everything. I used to blame myself for my failed relationships, friendships, blame myself for even drinking that much and just numbing myself. And then it wasn't until this, I think, season, this Cancer season, where I forgave myself. And I said that I used something as a means to help myself go through a lot of pain and trauma. And anybody who goes through a difficult time, trauma, or just like heartbreak of any kind, we don't live in a society that even acknowledges mental health. We have to literally pay for our care, our health care. there isn't a community sense or community care here where it's easily accessible to find help. So don't feel bad. Don't judge yourself for just trying to survive, to trying to make it each day. And I forgive myself because, again, I was just so mean to myself. I was so mean and harsh. And I would never begrudge a friend who was going through that. So why was I doing that to myself? It's like I wanted to control, alt, delete that part of my life. And I realized like those were some of the most important years of my life because now I'm here. I'm more self regulated. I'm more grounded. I'm more in my body. I know who I am. I know what I've been through. And now I can help other people not feel as lonely and not as lost. So I really wanted to say that first and foremost because a lot of my clients and people who DM me and message me are always saying, you know, you're such a light, you're so optimistic, and I wish I could be like that. And it just so happens that I'm in this timeline right now and in this moment in my life where I found this clarity, and you will too. It's an ever unfolding. And don't think for one second that I still don't have intrusive thoughts, because I do. I have them all the time. And I think this is also another reason why I wanted to do this episode, because I was having the worst intrusive thoughts, the worst, so bad, in fact, that I went back to running. And for those of you who don't know, I ran the New York City Marathon 6 years ago, and I was a huge runner. I ran track in high school. I completed 2 half marathons, 1 marathon. And then all of a sudden, after that marathon, I was like, that's enough for me, no running. But I actually started running again this summer because my intrusive thoughts were just so bad. And my intrusive thoughts were centered around me taking rest and taking a break because I'm actively healing my mind from capitalism, patriarchy, and white supremacy. And so the first thoughts that came into my mind as I would wake up is, oh my God, you're taking a day off, you're going to the beach, you're useless, you're not doing anything, you're lazy. And I know these thoughts aren't true. So I had to really examine where they came from. And so I began this journey probably in the beginning of the summer. It started happening. And then I started really looking into this, like, where do these things come from? Where do these thoughts come from? And I've always had this baseline feeling like that I wasn't good enough, that I had to constantly prove myself and explain myself. And the last, I would say, year, September 2022, like somewhere around there, when I was promoting my book and creating content around my book and really trying to put my message out there, I had to kind of pull some of my content back, the way in which I wanted to express myself. And I can't even blame my editor or publisher or certain PR people, because we're all under the same evilness that is white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy. Because I don't want to blame the individual, I want to blame the system. But I was told to pull back my message a little bit, just like pad my words a little bit, make it a little beige, make it a little bit more accessible to people. And so I found myself not fully being able to express myself, to hide how I really wanted to speak. And if you know me in real life, you know that I'm very honest and blunt and straightforward. I'm also a New Yorker here and an Aries, so I don't pad my words to protect people's feelings, because ultimately that is not true to myself. But I found myself really padding my words, and all of a sudden I would get into my head. I would get into my head about how it would be perceived, how it would offend people, how it would make certain people feel a certain way. And then I did want to say this one note, because I saw a couple of reviews of my book and also my podcast, which added to this sentiment that if you are offended by me using the words white supremacy and white people or white bodied or white presenting, please go look up the reverse racism myth. Just stop listening to this altogether. Go look up the white what whiteness really is and how it's made up and how it's a tool for oppression and the reverse racism myth, basically. Because I don't want to pad my words anymore. And this is one of the things that I had to reclaim during this Venus retrograde in the sign of Leo. I'm reclaiming my dark feminine. I'm reclaiming how I want to deliver my message. I'm reclaiming my truth. And so if these words offend you, please just stop listening right now, because then this is not for you. I want to collaborate with people. I want to speak with people. I want to work with people where I don't have to explain myself. Yes, there is an education piece to everything. And the first thing to do in dismantling white supremacy, capitalism, ableism, patriarchy is to educate yourself on history, your own history, and the history of all these isms. So I wanted to say that disclaimer first before anybody feels they need to go on their little rant on Apple iTunes and write this review that I'm like a racist person. And yeah, I just wanted to say that first. Now, if you're ready, let's go forward. So this all really happened as a result of all of the retrogrades, Venus retrograde in the sign of Leo. And if you want to learn more about the Venus retrograde and how that is related to the myth of Inanna and her descent into the underworld and feminine energy, I highly recommend the astrology podcast by Chris Brennan and his guest, Demetria George. It was the latest one, and I'm recording this on August 15th, 2023. It was so validating. They basically paralleled the descent of Inanna to the Venus retrograde and also the Barbie movie. Now, I've also created a couple videos on my TikTok about how there is a duality to Venus. And I really understood this because I personally didn't relate to the love goddess version of Venus. So Venus as a evening star, where you could see Venus in the nighttime, is the love, like cuddly, romantic Venus. But Venus as a morning star in the daytime, when you see Venus right before the sun rises, is the warrior archetype. And I just happen to have that expression of Venus. A Venus that is more about justice and advocacy and activism. And also, my Venus is in the sign of Aquarius. Okay. So it all just makes sense. So I started studying about Venus, its 8-year synodic cycle, more in detail, and also the descent of Inanna. And if you don't know, Inanna was a goddess in ancient Mesopotamia. She was a Sumerian goddess. And her story is so beautiful, but basically, it is a journey into the underworld. It is a journey that's similar to Demeter and Persephone, Persephone being quote unquote abducted by Hades, which who knows if that part is even true. But it really is a story about facing your fears, about justice and grieving and feeling betrayed, and then coming up from the underworld and being reborn and being a fucking warrior. And I very much resonate to that expression of Venus, only because, again, I'm a morning star Venus. I feel very much that this specific retrograde, because it went from an evening star Venus, the feminine goddess-like Venus, and then after the Kazemi that just happened recently on August 13th, now Venus is becoming a morning star, a warrior archetype. And if you listen to Stephanie and I's July and August astrology forecast, I expressed very much that this Venus retrograde was going to be more about the dark feminine, how it's making contacts to Lilith and Eris, the goddess of discord, the North Node in Aries. And it's really a Venus retrograde about reclamation. and about being reborn as the fucking amazing, fierce woman, they, men, whoever that is within you, the feminine aspect of you. And so most of this conversation is going to be about feminine energy and also about reclaiming our natural state, which is spiritual in nature. And so, as somebody who observes cycles and patterns, and I speak in symbolism and omens, and I try to make this all cohesive, and I'm going to do my best to make it cohesive as possible. But just bear with me because there's a lot of moving parts here. So, a lot of this came from my own kind of little transformation, dark night of the soul moment during Cancer season this past July, and then into Leo season. And I really do love the visualization and metaphor of the caterpillar to the butterfly. So if you don't know, you can watch it on YouTube. You can, watch how it transforms. But the caterpillar, before it goes into a butterfly, is in the chrysalis, is in its cocoon. And it basically digests itself and liquefies itself. So it loses its identity. And I very much find that phase a part of the in between, when you are not quite in your past anymore, but you're not quite in your future yet. You're in that weird gooky phase where it feels super uncomfortable and nothing makes any sense. And I really feel collectively we're all kind of in that phase, just from the clients I've been seeing, both Reiki and astrology. We're all in that phase where we're ready for change. We've made the necessary movements, but like the thing ain't happening yet. So I really also wanted to validate everybody's experience and also say that these are just the times we're in based on the cycle and the astrological movements in the sky. I also did this podcast episode with Adama Cisse on her podcast, Black Moon Lilith. And I also wanted to reiterate it here because I wrote a book about how to manifest, as you can see here. And the more I learn and unlearn, the more I have to share about this topic. So, feminine energy, why is that so hard for us to fully embody and understand? And when I talk about this with my students in Reiki, it is very difficult because Reiki is a feminine energy. It's something that you receive. It's not something that you do. You don't do the healing. And that's like the first step when I teach my students, is that you're going to be all up in your head about it. You're going to try to intellectualize it and say, it's not working, or I don't feel it, or I'm not doing the healing, or the person can't feel it. But feminine energy is being in the yin state. It's being in the receptive state. And I do find it interesting that this is the year of the yin water rabbit, which is all about that. It's really about learning how to receive and being in that receptive state, which is so different than last year, which was the yang water tiger. Also, I just did an episode this year with Tiff about the year of the rabbit, if you want to go back and refer to that episode. So when we think about feminine energy and why it's so difficult, it's because we cannot fathom that we can just be without having to do, without having to work, without having to earn, to prove ourselves that we are worthy to receive something. So we live in capitalism. And my family has created a whole like drinking game around this. Every time Laura says patriarchy or capitalism or colonization, we have to take a drink. But literally, since the South Node was in Scorpio, everything that has been going wrong or is toxic or oppressive leads back to the root cause of these three things. And so we live in capitalism. So ever since we were little, ever since we were young, we were taught that we had to prove ourselves. We had to go out and do something. We had to work hard. We had to earn money. The fact that we came here as divine spiritual beings and we have to work to exist, I just know that my spirit cannot handle this fucking paradigm because it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me that on this beautiful, abundant earth, that everything grows freely on trees and on plants, that some idiot decided that it would make most of those trees barren so that we would have to spend money to go into a warehouse and put these fruits and vegetables in plastic, and then they would have to throw all of it out at an expiration date. But then there's still so many people in this world that are hungry. Like, make it make sense. Like, the math ain't mathin'. Just, again, my spirit cannot handle this paradigm. And sometimes I have to like take many weeks off of social media and watching the news because my spirit literally can't handle it. So again, capitalism makes us believe that we are not worthy if we are not doing. That's being in the masculine, but I wouldn't even call that masculine. I would call that being in some kind of messed up, wounded masculine. Because masculine energy is supposed to be the container, it's supposed to protect, it's supposed to be like the container in which the creative energy can flow. And we're not even living in that. This is like completely exploitative and violent. So no wonder why the feminine cannot fully feel safe enough to be in its creative energy and its creative power. So this also went back to, I think, around the solstice. I got a reading from a psychic medium reading from a medium, a psychic reading from a medium. And she said that I had to work on my feminine energy, that I was too much in my masculine. And honestly, that triggered me because I had been working on this for so long. But then I replied back to her and I said, well, yeah, I'm American. I'm a New Yorker. I'm the eldest daughter of immigrant parents. I have to be in my masculine because if I'm not, then I'm going to literally be taken advantage of. I'm going to be attacked. That's how I feel. I have to literally like put on this defensive mode. And I've always felt that I wasn't safe enough just to be and just to like, gallivant in like a little field. I don't know. So I said to her, you're saying this as somebody, I totally get it. Like, you're a spiritual person. I understand the spiritual aspect of it, but from a practical standpoint, we still live in this system where we live in a system where it is very violent towards feminine things. So I get it and I'm working on it, but that led me down this whole rabbit hole of, well, how do we then exist within this system? And that's when I found this book by Tricia Hersey, The Nap Ministry, from the Nap Ministry, Rest is Resistance. And this literally changed my brain chemistry because she literally validated everything that I was feeling. One of the things that she says, the first thing that happens when you start to divest in capitalism, ableism, patriarchy, and white supremacy is you start to feel guilt and shame. And those were the feelings I felt immediately when I decided to fully divest, right? And heal and decolonize my mind and unlearn. I felt guilty because my self-worth was tied to what I did and how much money I made and how much I'm doing and producing. And the more I would say I'm going to take a break and I would go and take a break, all I could think about was, you're so lazy. And that's what I used to hear as a kid. Like, if you slept late, and late by late, I meant like 9 a.m., or if you even took naps, I was a huge napper. Or if I just like would sit and daydream, my teachers would yell at me and tell my parents that, oh, she's like off in her la la land. Like, those things were seen as, she's not serious, she's flaky, or she's just a dreamer. How many times have I heard that? She's delulu, right? Like, all of these things. But really, Tricia Hersey says that in order for us to get out of these oppressive systems is to first prioritize rest. And rest doesn't just mean sleeping and napping. It means daydreaming. It means imagination. It means dream work, art, music, creativity, fantasy. I still love fantasy movies and books. That's like my favorite genre. You can find me there on Book Talk. That's all I'm reading because this is the only way that I was able to survive as a kid in a very violent household. And if you don't know that part of my story, I've shared this many times. Um, because anytime one of those incidents would happen, I would disassociate from my body and my soul and my mind would go somewhere else. It would go into a different land where I was safe and where I could just create my own reality. And I think that's why I'm so good at manifesting because I can create situations in my mind and believe them to be true because I had to out of survival. So I recommend this book. This is for everybody. And what I'm talking about here today and forever is that everybody, including white folks, we all have to do this work. We must. We have to do different levels of this work, but we all have to do this work. So, Rest is Resistance, a manifesto by Tricia Hersey. Literally, again, it changed my brain chemistry because every morning when I wake up now, I remind myself that I'm enough now. I don't need to work. I don't need to earn. I don't need to prove myself through my labor because capitalism's foundation was based on violence and enslavement of people. And so I don't want to align myself to something like that. I don't want to align myself to that kind of paradigm. I want to be more in alignment with a system that is about connecting, is about dreaming, is about community care. And even before I really understood what it meant, when I first started Awaken and Align, after I renamed it Chasing Wild Hearts, it came into my meditation to put it as collective dream and collective liberation. And this was like in 2000 and I would say 19, like even before I had even started like deconstructing these things. But now it all makes sense because first we need to rest enough to hear our spirit, because she also says that because we've aligned to capitalism, we've had to strip away our spirituality and our divinity. And so, in order for us to get back to our natural spiritual gifts and listening to our intuition, we have to remember to slow down and to actively resist the monster of capitalism. And so, my client yesterday, too, she was like, how do I listen to my higher self? How do I listen to my intuition? And I said, you have to slow down. Like you have to make it a priority, even if you're working full time, to make space in your day, even if it's for 5 to 10 minutes, to slow down enough to still your mind and body. And this just takes training, just like you would go to a gym to get cut or get a six pack. You have to train your mind and body to be still enough where your human mind, your ego, is quiet enough to sit in the back seat so that you could hear your higher self speaking louder, because your higher self will whisper, your ego will freaking scream at you. Your ego will be like, oh my gosh, we have to plan. We have to come up with all of these scenarios to keep you safe and secure, because that's the ultimate goal of the ego, of the human mind, is to keep you safe and secure. So thank you very much. But then also there is our higher self that is limitless, timeless, all-knowing, infinite, that already knows the way. And we just have to be still enough to hear that. And so I think what really helped me was learning why that happened in the first place. And so as children, we're already connected spiritually. We already know, we live in the moment, we play, we imagine, we dream. And then once we go to school, as Tricia Hersey says in her book, like, then we start to disconnect to our bodies because we have to like ask for permission to go to the bathroom. We have to memorize a bunch of facts. We can't use our creativity. We can't use our creative thinking minds. we're forced to use our left brain, our intellectual, logical brain to physically see the evidence, which again isn't all that bad, but that's just one side of our experience, the way we perceive things. But the right brain, the feminine side, is multidimensional. It is timeless, it's chaotic, it's the unknown, it's the darkness, it's the womb, it's creation. It is all the things that we just haven't been taught and encouraged to explore. So no wonder why you have people who are afraid to quit their jobs, who are afraid to leave that partner, who are afraid to take the next leap, because we've all been conditioned to believe that we need to know the answers. We need to know the step by step. We need to know the how and the when. But really, the how and the when is none of our business. We're meant to trust in the unknown and follow the breadcrumbs of where our desires are pulling us forward. Because again, time is a man-made construct. I know we need time for our human minds to like understand, but I believe that our desires pull us to the future because a future part of ourselves is pulling us in that direction. So this is what I said on Anonymous podcast. What if all of your desires were right here, right now? What if there was nothing you actually had to do? Would you believe it? Would you even think that you were worthy of it? Do you think that you have to struggle? Do you think you have to be in pain or work hard to achieve or manifest these desires? Like, what is your thinking around this? Because I think we've all also been programmed to believe that everything has to be so difficult. Meanwhile, I think humans make things more difficult than they need to be. So if the first law of thermodynamics states that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, everything is energy. I think we can all agree on those two things. So I'm going to repeat that. The first law of thermodynamics, which is physics, we all learned this in physics. I was in AP physics. Okay, if that gives me any credentials. Energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And then the second thing, everything is energy because everything is energetic in this universe. So if that's the case, then the thing that you desire is already here. It's already created. Everything is in this timeline, because again, time is not real. Time is a fiction, figment of our human imagination to make sense of this world. So the only reason why it's not a part of your experience yet, why you haven't manifested it yet, is because you don't perceive of it. And you don't perceive of it because there's a part of you that doesn't either believe it or there's something that's blocking it. And what's blocking it, I mean, I could bet it has something to do with the way you were raised when you were a kid, right? Or the way that your parents believed in love, money, the way this universe works. This is psychology 101, by the way. So I gave the example of a soulmate or a love, a relationship, because most people either want to manifest a soulmate or money. So let's start with the soulmate. You want to manifest the soulmate because of what you believe this person will give you, that feeling. Okay, so think back to when you were a kid. Whose love did you crave the most that you didn't get? And what was that love or what was that feeling that you wanted from your parent? So I will give an example. And it could be both parents, by the way, not just one parent. So from my mother, I wish that, or I was craving that she would have some emotional safety and security. From my father, I wanted also safety and security. So what I want from my romantic partner has always been about safety and security. So then I attracted men who I felt were safe and secure, whether that came in the form of money or a home, or usually it tended to tie in with financial because again, that's what we usually tie money to, is a sense of security. And also a feeling like there was a pattern there. When I started doing this work, I noticed a pattern. And this is when you keep attracting karmic partners. Again, this is like no judgment. It's just being aware of these things so that you can break the karmic cycle. So by karmic, I just mean a repeated pattern. So you keep repeating a pattern with certain love partners. And I noticed that I was starting to do that after my last long-term committed relationship because I had kept attracting the same kind of person, just in different skin suits. So somebody who was like safe and secure in one way, but weren't able to commit in other ways and weren't emotionally available. So I had to keep attracting that person until I looked back at myself and said, damn, girl, it's you. You are the common thread. So then I had to look at what was that thing that I need to heal within myself so that I stopped attracting these people. And honestly, what really helped me was actually after my last long-term relationship, I was going out and dating people through like Tinder and Bumble. And I noticed that it was the same guy, just in different, again, skin suits, because they were saying the same exact things. They were doing the same exact things. And I was like, oh my God, there's the pattern. And when you start changing inwardly, when you start healing those parts of yourself and start stitching the wounds of your inner child, you stop attracting that person. And then that karmic pattern ends. And that's the most important key of manifestation is you want to manifest something different from what you're currently experiencing because we're manifesting all the time. The key is if you want to manifest something that is more aligned to what you want to experience. And I would say most of us want to experience like an experience that is going to help us grow, that is supportive, that is loving, that is not toxic, somebody who doesn't run away from self-growth, right? I feel like I can say we all want the same thing in some regards. Okay, money. Money represents different things to so many different people. It can represent safety and security. It could represent freedom. It could represent all of the above. But what the problem is that money also is tied to people's self-worth. So what I love about Rest is Resistance is she says that you have to start to detach your own worth via divesting from capitalism to the amount of money that you have, the amount of money that you make, and the possessions that you have, because that doesn't actually equal your worth. And we all know that, right? We can all kind of understand that intellectually, but embodying that is such a different story because, again, this is deep programming that we have to deconstruct and dismantle in our minds and our bodies. So a lot of people want to manifest more money for safety, security, and also freedom of choice, but also for validation of their self-esteem in some way. And that's really hard because, again, capitalism has done a fucking messy job. It wreaks such terribleness into our self-esteem because, and I will tell you, after Pluto moving through my second house of finances, self-worth, and self-value, it has been a long 15 years of really understanding what self-worth and self-esteem really mean when you don't have a high-profile job, or you don't have much money, you don't have possessions, you don't have a mortgage, you don't have a home, you don't have a boyfriend, you don't have the traditional things that people tie their worth to these days in 2023. Luckily, things are changing, right? Like women can have their own money now. Women can, they've decentered men. Women can do live their lives the way that they want to, right? But that has been just a recent phenomenon. So it's been just interesting journey in like, what is my self-worth? What is my self-esteem when I don't have any of those things to say about myself? And again, just like the descent into the underworld by Inanna, that's why that story just really like, and Chris Brennan has visuals on his YouTube channel that literally track my own descent to my underworld because so the whole story is Inanna she doesn't have to, but she decides to descend into the underworld. She's the queen of the heaven. Her sister, Ereshkigal, is the queen of the underworld. And Ereshkigal's husband dies. And so she wants to pay homage to her and her husband. And so she has to pass through the 7 gates to hell, basically. And Ereshkigal is like, you're so, you're not special. You can't just go into the underworld and like not pay the consequences. So at each gate, there's 7 gates. Inanna has to sacrifice something. And so I think the first gate, she had to get rid of her crown because, again, she's a queen. So she's like fully decked out. And by the time she gets to the last one, she's like completely naked, completely vulnerable. And it just reminded me of my own Pluto journey, because the second house in astrology is also the gates of Hades, which Hades is Pluto, god of the underworld, in case you didn't know. And I just remember like during this time, so Pluto has been in Capricorn since 2008. During this time is when I started working at a private equity firm. In 2008 was my first one. And then I quit. I worked at a startup during that time. I started my travel blog, and then I went back to private equity, and then I quit private equity again, and then I started my travel blog again, and then I went on my spiritual journey, literally going into the underworld. But every step of the way, I had to sacrifice something. And a lot of the sacrifices were stuff that I didn't want to give up. Like I gave up my ex in 2013. He was like the epitome of safety and security in everyone's eyes. But I'm not about that life. I'm about growth and expansion. So we broke up and in some ways gave up this life that everybody dreams of. I gave up my home when I quit my job in lovely Tribeca, by the way, super nice place, and all of my furniture, gave away a lot of my clothing, and yeah, gave up safety and security in the form of a corporate job, and gave up a few friends along the way who just weren't in alignment with me anymore. So like, in my own way, I realized that now, August 2023, I am literally being reborn into the person that I always knew I was meant to be. And I was telling my Reiki client last night, like, this is an ever unfolding, there's never a destination. This is like the heroine's journey. But it's so rewarding because you have to go through all of that. You have to go through your fears. You have to go through your personal underworld. People will leave your life. You have to make a stand in what you believe in, listening to your intuition, even though it doesn't make sense at the time. None of this made sense at the time. I was like, why are you doing this, Laura? Sheesh. Just live a life of what do they call it on TikTok? Sprinkle, sprinkle. But I just knew something deeper was calling me. And now, during Leo season, I honestly believe this Venus retrograde in Leo was so life-changing for me, because I realized that first I had to own who I was. I'm a spiritual person. I'm a healer, and I'm a little weird. And I've always been a little weird. I've always been a little mystical and a little daydreamy and a little delusional, but I have to just own that. and be okay with that. And then secondly, I have to just share my experience and talk in a way that doesn't feel confined or constricted or contracted or whatever, but speak my truth in the way that it needs to come out. And if people don't understand me and if people don't like me, that's not my fucking problem. So I had to like own these two things. And so when I started sharing again on TikTok and Instagram, these videos like started going viral again, and people, my friends specifically, noticed a shift in my energy. They noticed a shift in my voice because it's something that's coming from deep within me that I cannot explain, but I just had to get my mind and my body on board with all of this. Like, this is who I am. If you don't like it, okay, great. I don't want to listen to you talk about your stupid whatever. And that's okay, you know? So, yeah, I think the most important thing that I wanted to share with you on this episode is that we all have a message. We all have something important to share. Some of us find it earlier than others, but there's no timing. Again, you're on your own time. And each challenge, and I don't know why, but I personally learned the best through challenge, through tower moments, through destruction. It must be my astrological placement specifically. I just learned that way. I learned through like adversity. I learned through the grit that rubs against the pearl through a long period of time. I don't know why, but I do. And so I can just say that you have to first do whatever it takes to get to the core of who you are. And this is such a new moon in Leo kind of thing. The new moon in Leo happens on August 16th, 2023. Leo is in its home sign or its domicile in the sun. And we still have a Venus retrograde going on. We have Pluto retrograde still going on. So it's going to keep bringing up these things that have been hidden from us, these like shocking truths. The North Node is in Aries, which is all about understanding yourself. I am. And the South Node in Libra, releasing anything that is not in alignment with you or your relationships. And you need to make it your priority to know who you are. I am Aries, North Node. Who are you? If you stripped away what you were told about you, yourself, how to live your life, this world, and how the universe works. And honestly, Saturn retrograde in my personal fourth house, I decided when that went retrograde to throw out everything that I've learned from my parents, everything that my ancestors have maybe adopted that isn't true for me now. Of course, there's wisdom, but I personally don't want to live a life with scarcity mentality and poverty consciousness and like nickel and dime everything. I personally don't believe that. I believe we live in an abundant universe. I also believe that doing the healing work necessary so that the oppressed don't become the oppressor, that we truly channel our rage and our sacred anger into our creativity so that we don't continue the cycle of violence and oppression. And that ultimately, rest, dreaming, creativity is the key to co-creating a more harmonious and beautiful world for the future. And honestly, I'm saying this not even knowing what it's going to look like, because I don't think we've personally experienced this in our lifetimes, maybe even our ancestors' lifetimes. But I know the feeling and I'm trusting my intuition and just continually to do this work of dismantling and deconstructing. So whatever you need to do to get to the truth of who you are. And I just know this about human design too, which I found so fascinating. 70% of the population are generators and manifesting generators. So chances are most of you listening to this are in that 70%. And our job is not to chase, it's not to hunt down or even initiate. We are meant to attract. This is why feminine energy has been at the forefront of my mind, because attraction is the law of attraction is Venus energy. It is feminine energy. It's being in the receptive mode. And manifesting is being in the receptive mode. It's attracting and magnetizing to you what is meant for you in your energy. So if 70% of the population started deconstructing and dismantling what they were taught through programming, through patriarchy, ableism, white supremacy, capitalism, the axis of evil, and really got down to who they are, knew who they are, and from that, our natural core of power attracted, we would be living in a world that was peaceful. People would be fulfilled. And fulfillment is different from pleasure, because not everything we do is going to be fun, right? Like cleaning my house, is that fun? I don't know. But do I feel fulfilled? Yes. I feel like, wow, I feel amazing after that. So when you start doing things for fulfillment, not based on scarcity, not based on what you think you need to do, and you start attracting things to you, more people would be rested, more people wouldn't be burnt out and still in this like grind culture thing, you know? And it took me a long time to heal from grind culture. I'm still healing from grind culture. I have a mom who's a Capricorn moon. Try living with that, okay? And immigrant parents nonetheless. So I just found that fact to be fascinating. So more of us would benefit from understanding Venus energy, from understanding attraction and what that really means, feminine energy, being in the yin state. And then we wouldn't need to like hustle and grind. We would trust that everything comes when it's meant to come in divine timing, and we would understand time in a totally different way as well. And we wouldn't push and we wouldn't try to control things based on a void. We would all feel more whole, and then there would be no competition. There would be no hoarding. Everybody would share their resources, because what I also found with abundance, and I just honestly knew this from observing the raspberry bushes where I grow up. So every season around the first week of August, all the raspberry bushes become so ripe and full. And I don't know, most people don't know that you could eat them. They're wild raspberries. So like literally they become so overripe that these bushes are just filled with them. And so it would be in our best interest to pick them and then share them with others, because otherwise they would just like die and rot. And that to me is abundance. It's when you have so much, because nature is abundant, that you have to share with people. Otherwise it would go bad. I don't know. Nature is my biggest muse. Every time I feel like scarcity or I feel lost, I observe nature. I observe flowers. They just bloom in their own time. There's no rush. Everything gets done. They just receive the pollination from bees, and they're just so beautiful. Okay, now I'm rambling. So, anyway, I just wanted to send all of you so much love. I am currently working on an astrology 101 course and other projects. So make sure to subscribe to my newsletter. You can find me on laurakchung.com. That's my personal website. And then awakenalign.life for the podcast website. You can follow on Instagram and TikTok on my personal page at I am Laura Chung. Beware of scammers. I will never solicit readings. And Awaken and Align at Instagram as well. I hope you all have such a beautiful week, and I will see you next time. Bye.